Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, the Guide to Italian Travel. This is a special episode. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
That's our special episode sound.
Oh yeah, we should totally have one.
Oh, and I'm Darcy Melton.
So what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about, well, you did all the research, you're going to tell me, but the Venice fee, the entry fee that they had going on, which is now over, right? They did like
Correct,
a trial.
yes.
So that's what we're going to talk about.
That's exactly right, Darcy Melton. I don't know, I feel like I should throw like a game show voice in there. Feels like that's what they do in game shows. But yes, so we had a special episode. I don't know if everyone heard it. I think it was under the episode of Italy Isn't...
Breaking up with you, she's just setting boundaries?
Exactly.
Something like that.
And we published that episode basically, I think a few months ago, and it was around the same time. There's all these articles. It's usually the beginning of the season, the beginning of the tourism season, especially American and honestly British tourists. There's a lot of articles about how like Italy doesn't want you, Italy doesn't want tourists, go back home. And one of these things, I guess the things we covered was this Venice tourist tax, this $5 fee, basically levied against anybody who is only going to Venice for the day. Mm-hmm. This included predominantly, it seemed like a targeted towards like cruise ship, people coming out like cruise ship passengers, people coming off of a cruise ship. But it also was targeting people staying in Mestre, which is right over the water from Venice, like right over it's not a lagoon, it's the bay, maybe.
Is it a bay? It's a river. No,
I think it's more of a bay or a lagoon.
Okay,
it's
a body of water.
Yeah. I gotta look, because I know that Venice is on a lagoon, which is a great word.
It is, but I thought you kept saying legume, like a peanut.
Oh, Venice sits on a peanut.
Yes.
So in Mestre, which is just over the water, which is one of the two train stops. So if you're actually taking the train into Venice, you can stop at Mestre, Venice Mestre, or Venice Principale, or Venice Centrale. And so people were staying there because it's a lot cheaper and taking the bus in. But then what they were doing is they're like, oh, it's cheaper to have breakfast and have dinner in Mestre, but we'll go in and maybe we'll have lunch or maybe we won't have lunch. But then they weren't bringing money into Venice. So this episode is going to be shorter than our normal ones. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to do a little update because now the experiment is over and it might affect some of your trips. If you're coming in August, if you're coming out in September, it might not. It might affect your trip for next year if you're somebody who plans in advance. Because next year this is expected to continue. So we wanted to give a little brief update to let you all know where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just want to say before we get into the episode, thank you everybody for liking and following and commenting wherever you're listening. It is super helpful to us. It makes us happy and it also boosts us up.
Absolutely. And thank you to the 17 people who followed us on Google Podcasts before Google Podcasts turned into YouTube Music. I just found out yesterday that we had 17 followers on Google Podcasts. So thank you to those 17 of you who were with us to the very end of Google Podcasts. And we have no sponsorships or ads, obviously. But if you'd like to support the channel, in the description there will be a link to our affiliate link for booking. So if you are going to take a trip anytime soon and you'd like to support our channel, it doesn't have to be to Italy. It could be anywhere. You could book a flight or a hotel room or like a car, I think. Maybe even a ferry. I don't really know what booking has. We just do it for hotel rooms.
I don't think they have ferries. I think it's flights and hotels.
And cars?
And cars.
Okay. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so through our booking affiliate link. We get a little portion of bookings money, and there's no extra cost to you or to your total charge, I guess.
Yeah,
your
booking pays us. You don't pay us.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's everything. Without further ado, and I guess I was going to say we are using booking this month because this is technically our hotel month. So we thought what a perfect opportunity. So yes, without further ado, the Venice tourism tax. Mm-hmm. So I guess briefly to explain, if you have missed the last episode, Darcy, could you explain what the Venice tourism tax is?
Probably. I'll do my best. Okay, so Venice enacted a tax, which is it's €5 per day. It's basically an entry fee into
per
Venice.
person per day.
Yes, but it was over a 3-month period.
I think it was from April to the end of July. Yeah.
Okay, but there were only certain days when it was happening. It wasn't every day for that entire period. It was a total of 12?
29 days.
29 days. Okay, that's more than I thought. But it was only certain days. It was mostly weekends.
Mostly right? Weekends, holidays, any sort of days they targeted as days from last year that were high visitation days. Okay. So some of these were days that a lot of cruise ships happen to dock nearby, or they happen to just get an influx of tourists from wherever. So they sort of recognize these high influx days, and sort of that's the day they chose to add the tax.
Okay. That makes sense. So 29 days of this April to July period. And the government who enacted it, their theory was this will make the city a lot of money. It will cut down on tourists. People will go maybe somewhere else, because Venice has a big problem with tourism. A lot of people come in, and it's specifically with people who are on the cruise ships or don't stay in Venice. They ended up not contributing very much financially to the city. So I guess the government's theory was this will make us money for the city, or it will cut down on people coming in and not spending money. Whenever the government announced this initiative, a lot of Venetians took to the streets. They protested.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
They were like, this is not going to help. It doesn't fundamentally help the people who live here. And where is the money going? I think was a major question.
And that's still a major question, because they made, spoiler alert, they made, I think, 2.4 million euros from this over 29 days. Not only that, not only did they not see a reduction in people coming, they had some of the days that they were charging people had more people coming that day than the same day the previous year.
Okay.
Yeah, last year. I think one day was like the most was 5,000 more people came on a day that they were being charged than the previous year where it was free. And I only mention that because that was something that, again, there's now 2.4 million euros in the Venice city coffers, but there's no plan on how to use that.
Right, which is insane.
There's no like, oh, we're gonna. I mean, because one of the things you mentioned is, people coming in and being sort of not a strain, but a strain, I think, on Venice resources. And one of the things we mentioned that first episode was the amount of trash produced by tourists.
Right.
It's something like, I can't really, I wish I had the statistic in front of me, but it's something like 4 or 5 times the amount of trash is per person, in the sense of like, there's a couple thousand Venetians living in Venice, and it's like, instead of, creating X amount of tons of trash every year, it's 5 or 6 times higher than what they should be creating. That's just because there are people, they will buy food, they will buy gifts, they will buy things, they throw away trash, and it does create a...
Or people bring in their own, like, little bag lunches,
yes, exactly.
bottles of water, which, you should in the summertime. Stay
100%,
hydrated.
yes.
But people bring in trash, and then they're not...
And then throw it away,
And throw it away, which is great. Throw away your trash, be responsible.
Yeah, 100%.
But it does produce a lot of waste in the city that people are not then paying taxes for.
Yes.
Or helping financially figure out the situation,
And I think it's difficult because, again, we've mentioned this in that previous episode. Darcy and I are from Savannah, which is a very touristy place, and I think every year it gets a little bit more touristy, which is awesome. I mean, there's a lot of benefits, and to anybody listening, and if you're from a place that gets a lot of tourism as a main source of income, it's a very much a double-edged sword, because you get the benefits, which is one of the benefits of Savannah is there's like it pays to keep Savannah beautiful, because people are coming to Savannah to see it beautiful. So it's like it pays to have it beautiful. In Venice, it's the same way. It's a lot easier in Savannah though, because a lot of trash does not blow into the canals, where unfortunately in Venice it does. I'm thinking just a simple comparison to Savannah or other touristy places where it's like there's also more space. Savannah's touristy downtown area is not huge. It's a mile by a mile. And
is that it?
I think so. Technically, it's maybe a little bit. Maybe it was like 2 miles by a mile now, because it's spread a little farther. But traditionally, it's like that 1 mile. From I think Oglethorpe to the river, and then East Broad to West Broad. It's just like that's the downtown.
But we like the touristy part of Savannah, air quotes, the historic district is connected to a much larger city, which is then connected to a much bigger county area.
Sure.
But Venice is, it's an island. It's also sinking.
It's also
they have so many issues.
Well, but they also have the reason I brought up just the square footage is a lot of Venice, as you mentioned, is water. So you're not walking along the canals. A lot of the streets some of them are dead ends, some of them just lead to the canal or to the boat. So there's very few, proportionally, there are very few places to walk. Let me rephrase this. There are a lot of neighborhoods of Venice, I think, that people don't explore because it's not famous. or there's nothing really happening in these neighborhoods. And even a lot of these things they're trying to enact are for like Murano, Burano, and one of the other islands. It's basically these major population density areas. But no, I mean, one of the biggest issues they're talking about is like when you have an alleyway that is literally 7 feet wide and you have 100 people in the alleyway on a tour, you cannot get through the alleyway to a grocery store or to the post office or to the bank or anything like that. Because it's just simply a wall of bodies, and at a certain point it's just not feasible to move these bodies aside. So the reason we wanted to because I think that was a really good explanation of the tourist tax. And we did mention too in the last episode, not the last episode, but the last episode we talked about this, is that there's a lot of exceptions for this tourist tax.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you are staying in Venice, you don't have to pay. If you're visiting a friend in Venice, you don't have to pay. If you live in Venice, obviously, you don't have to pay. And then even beyond that, if you are if you are, I think, disabled or you're a carer of somebody who's disabled, you're free. If you're a child under a certain age, I think it's like 12, it's free. I mean, there's a lot of these different, like, it's really, again, one of those things we joked about, I think, in a previous episode, talking about like the train, like you only pay a full amount for the train if you're between like 30 and 55.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. It's like if you're by yourself and between 30 and 55 is, when you're paying the full amount for Venice. And of course, as you mentioned too, the biggest issue is that the Venetians were basically like, that's not the issue. The issue isn't, necessarily over tourism caused by cruise ships, especially when I think in 2021 they banned cruise ships from coming up the major canal.
But they still can park right outside the city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They just can't destroy.
Well, were people? I thought that many Venetians were upset about cruise ships docking and coming into the city.
Yes.
Okay.
And they were actually I think they were like a week away from being blacklisted by UNESCO, which means taking off the list. Because UNESCO does have rules such as it can't be over touristed. You can't you can't be succumbing to over tourism. You have to kind of look relatively like yourself. Like Venice can't look like another city. Like you can't put high rises in Venice. You have to put them outside of Venice. Things like that. You can't affect the skyline. And one of the big things was they're allowing these cruise ships, and they're saying if you do that, you're destroying Venice. And when you're repairing it, you're not doing it in a historically appropriate way. So we're gonna have to pull your thing. Some people were like, that's terrifying. We need to be UNESCO World Heritage Site. Others, I think one of the previous councilmen of Venice was like, who cares? Like, they don't give us money. They don't give us funding. They just tell us what we can and cannot do, but then don't give us the tools to enact those things.
I kind of get that, but that's just not a good, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a healthy stance to take.
It doesn't, because, I think his thing was like, Venice is always going to be Venice. It doesn't matter. And I think...
But it's not.
If
you don't protect it, it's not going to stay that way.
And I think that was a lot of other people's things. It's like, it's only Venice because it looks like Venice. But as soon as it stops looking like Venice, as soon as it starts looking like some other place, or as soon as you start building things that are not Venetian remotely looking... Plus, I feel like humans are like innately capitalistic. Oh, for sure, yeah.
I mean, I feel like history has shown us that. So if you're not listening to the people who are saying protect our city, don't let the cruise ships in with people who potentially are being irresponsible. But the biggest thing was like it was an ecological problem. Like the cruise ships were coming way too close to the city. They were causing problems with the canals. And Venice was essentially letting that happen, it seems like, until UNESCO was like, hey, no. You need to keep those cruise ships outside of this area to protect your city.
Or we'll kick you off the list. Yeah. Exactly.
So clearly, the Venice government cannot be trusted.
Well, it seems a little bit like, it seems kind of difficult. I think we even talked about in the last, that original episode, is it just seems like, it's almost, it seems really unfortunate because Venice as a city is kind of like the guinea pig right now. Even with the tax, like a lot of other areas are Bologna and Siena, but even like, Bruges and things like that, not even Italian cities, are wondering like, is this going to work? Is this 5-year tourist tax going to work? Because Venice does need basically hundreds of millions of euros worth of work to keep it from sinking, to keep a lot of these buildings are uninhabitable because it could collapse into the water at any time, kind of thing. I think there's Seagate, the thing that keeps the floods from being that bad, is deteriorating. I mean, they have a lot of these issues. So it doesn't. I think it is difficult because the 2.4 million euros seems like a lot, but I think that's what people are worried about because it's not enough to fix Venice.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like, for instance, sanitation workers are being paid more for being around. But the other big thing that I thought was fascinating is with this tourist tax, one of the things they were going to do is essentially do random checks to make sure that you've paid your thing. So you have to have a receipt either on your phone or a physical receipt that says you've paid it. And I think because the tax is only €5, but I think the fee was like 50 for not having paid it. So it's supposed to be kind of like just like we talked about, like the Rome episodes. Like if you ride the bus without paying, I think it's a €50 fine as well. So it's supposed to be enough to deter people, but not enough to like
bankrupt you.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not trying to destroy your vacation. They're just like, if you're not going to pay for the ticket, we're going to make this a kind of expensive lesson for the day. But they weren't using police force to police this issue.
Okay.
They were hired 70 stewards, like city stewards, that what they would do is randomly check. The issue is
that seems better than having police.
They never checked.
What were they doing?
Well, when you, just like in America, when you give somebody a ticket, that person can go to court and contest it. And none of the 70 stewards basically wanted to go to court. So essentially they were like, if I don't give a ticket, I don't have to go to court for this ticket. Yeah. So I think there was, it was something like, they had some sort of statistic of how few people, how many of the stores actually bother to check tickets, because they knew as soon as somebody puts up a fight and it gets into a court, it turns into this huge court case about, and they're just...
Okay, that sounds so Italian.
It sounds so Italian.
But so these people were hired, like essentially seasonal workers.
Essentially
it's kind
seasonal
of what
workers,
they seem like. Okay. And I don't mean to advocate for people not being paid for their job. People should be paid for their work. But so my question is, these people were hired and paid some sort of salary, and then they didn't do what they were hired to do?
Sounds like it. And I do wonder too, because I'm kind of imagining, and this is I think where last time we talked about one of Venice's as a city's, especially with a lot of the tour guides, especially with a lot of the council people, with just a lot of the sort of political advocates of Venice. One of their biggest fears is it being turned into like a Disneyland. And they're like, if we put those cute little things that turn turnstile. Like, what are those called? You just run into them at full force. If you put a turnstile at the beginning of the areas, people are going to come in and it just immediately start thinking it's basically a theme park. And right now, I think one of the things we mentioned was some sort of quote, like somebody asked, like one question they're frequently asked is, what time does Venice close? And they're like, it's a city. It doesn't close. You don't have to leave. But it's like, that's what happens when you start charging a thing and creating turnstiles. And so I think when they have these stewards as well, it even further sort of pushes upon this, like, that these people are there to take photos for you. They're there to clean up the trash. They're there to give directions. And I think some of them, were giving directions and things like that.
Okay.
But it's also like, as you mentioned, it's sort of like, that's I love that. And it does start to make it veer more into theme park and less into... because in Rome, that would be, weird. In New York City, that would be weird.
Yes.
In any, I'm just thinking like San Francisco, Miami, any touristy cities, it would be so strange.
I think it's a cool idea that if the government of Venice were not charging money for people to enter, if they were doing other things to, or maybe in addition to, actually raise money for the city, actually protect the people who live there, maintain the integrity of the city, I think it's a cool idea to have people around who are like sanctioned official guides of the city who can help you and direct you to, like tourist points for, I don't know, getting educated on the city, or like in the summertime when they have the cooling points to keep people from passing out. I think if there were people around the city who were doing things like that and they were paid by the city, like that's a cool idea during high tourist times. But I don't know. It just doesn't really seem to make sense the way they were currently doing it.
It doesn't. And I think, and again, there's a lot of, again, I keep repeating this, that same fear. People are like, where's that money going? Because it's not like, there's a huge fear, obviously, of
the politicians just pocketing the money.
Really, yeah. And I know that Italy is often seen as corrupt from outside, and it's not that corrupt. I think it's less corrupt and more, well, I think actually it's funny, like there's a similarity to Atlanta, because people, like, we're not from Atlanta, but Atlanta is often called like the biggest small city in America, because it's like one of those places where everybody knows each other. And it's just, I think it was a year ago during the court case, the Trump court case, people were like, oh, this is the first time Atlanta's been like the world. I mean, it was the Olympics, I think, in '96, but it was like the first time it's been on the world stage in such like a bright spotlight, and people were like, "Is that how things happen in Atlanta?" And it was like, yes, but like to an extent, no. But it's hard, so it's hard to explain. Like, again, we're not from there, from Savannah, but it's very similar. It's kind of like who you know and not what you know. And I think Italy is very similar. It's not uncommon for people to hire their friends. It's not uncommon for people to hire family. It's not uncommon for, I mean, even like so many of these companies, I think Ferrari maybe, or maybe it was Fiat, one of them, it's just, it's family for generations. And it's like, yes, maybe not the best people you could have hired. It's like arguably family's not the best people you can hire. And it's just, but that's just what you do. And I think that's the kind of, Italy gets, I think, a lot of fire because it does look corrupt, but it's just like, I think it's that same thing of like, oh, you can get me tickets to this thing. It's like, yes, but I can only do that if I abuse my position as XYZ. But that doesn't, I think that's almost like not part of the equation sometimes, like just that sort of, and I think basically I'm bringing this back to Venice because it's like, it's not so much as corrupt, it's just like people are going to take that and think they might be doing something good with it. And I'm like, no, but you did something that benefits 5 people. It happens to be like, you donated money to make whatever, an elevator in an apartment building. It just happens to be your mom lived in an apartment building and her hip's getting bad. So
well, I don't think it's dissimilar to a lot of other places around the world. But I do think it's just that there are a lot of people in politics in Venice who are making possibly what they think are good decisions. Like, I can understand how a lot of people would think that charging people €5 to get in to Venice, and it's only 29 days of the summer.
Exactly,
like that.
yeah.
Okay, on paper or in that small statement, maybe that does seem great. However, a giant amount of the population of Venice turned out and said, no, we don't think this is a good choice. And the government continued to do it.
Anyway.
So whether it's corruption or not, it seems like they're not listening to the people of Venice. And that's the issue, which is much of like, that's politics. That's what's happening all over the world, And
I think also, there's also the argument too that they were elected in. So there is that sort of argument that everyone who didn't show up to the protest is okay with it. But even so, that's really difficult because, as we mentioned, I think in that episode, it's not uncommon for people to not live where their residence is, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Or the residency is. Like in the States, I feel like it's so weird. Like you wouldn't, like if I'm in Georgia and I moved there from somewhere else, I would pretty much immediately I would change my residence to be my new house because it makes sense and there's no downside to it. But in Italy, there's often a lot of downsides to it. Part of it is just paperwork. Part of it is healthcare reasons. Part of it is tax reasons. Part of it is a whole slew of things. So there are people potentially living in Venice who have moved, it's, over tourism, and moved to Mestre and moved outside Venice, or maybe just moved to Rome or Milan or something, but who still get to vote in those elections. So it's also one of those things where, and that says something as we've even seen here, like in this small town where we live in Italy, it's people who no longer live here because they've moved to other big cities have an idea that like this small town operates as other big cities in Italy do, or it does, and which makes it really difficult because I'm like, it doesn't. And it's like the amount of money you think people have here, it isn't true. And the amount of way people work here, how things work here isn't true. But you mentioned just the tax and the politicians, and something that the reason I wanted to bring this up, especially for people listening for next year, it's been hinted at that by and large, the council members think it's been a success. There have been a couple of dissenters, a couple of people saying that was a nightmare. That, again, we got more people even coming than last time, that there was not. So what they decided is potentially doubling the price to €10 a day per person.
So dumb.
And increasing the amount of days that this is in effect. And I think, again, it's like it's hard to defend that, I think, even for them, because it's like, how do you just not see this as €5 million next year? How do you see this as an actual... no part of, like, by no metric did tourism slow down. So like by no metric did the core problem become solved, but because they just made 2 million more euros than they thought they would, it was like, oh, that's actually, we didn't realize people are willing to pay for this.
But again, it doesn't seem like they're putting anything in place that is productive. Like maybe they're making money. I mean, 2.5 million euros is a lot of money for regular people, but it's not a lot of money for a city, especially a sinking city with a lot of problems. So they're making money, but it doesn't seem like they have a plan for what that money's going to do and what it's going to help. They're just excited that they've made money.
Yeah. And two other things I did want to mention, just because kind of on this note, is One is tour guides. And this is something, I guess, again, for people listening, with Darcy and I have rarely taken tours, but when we do, especially when they're like from a good source, it's very enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
We actually took a tour of the Vatican from the Vatican. No, not of the Vatican. Excuse me. Of Basilica di San Pietro.
No.
St. Peter's Basilica.
St. Peter's. Yeah. San Pietro. Sure.
Right? Okay. Just making sure because it's St. Mark's, Piazza di San Marco. Okay. So yeah, it's funny. Sometimes I can't remember what it is in English because people here just say it in Italian. So I'm like, is that it? That doesn't sound right. So St. Peter's Basilica, we took a tour there from the Vatican tour guides, and it was just phenomenally
Totally
interesting.
worth it. Yeah.
We also didn't realize, that was the first time we realized that the St. Peter's Basilica was free. We'd always seen these crazy long lines, and we just never wanted to get into the line to figure out how much it was and then like get out of line. So I think for years we were in Rome, and then we finally went and we're like, oh, it's free?
You could just go in this
Yeah,
place?
and it was, I think there was a time where all churches in Rome were free, and now the only church that is a fee is the Pantheon. And that was a really rude awakening. We went to Siena, and all churches are not free. Like the Duomo in Siena is costs money. And I think, but Florence, by and large, are all free. I think even the Duomo there is free. Anyway, sorry, that's off topic. But the reason I mentioned tour guides is because it can be an amazing way to see Venice, especially if you have a good tour guide, especially if it's a good tour, good group of people. It can be a really good reason as to why you want to see Venice. And so they've also enacted, I think just recently, July 31st, so like 11 days ago, they enacted that no tour group can be over 25 people. And then no tour group or no one can use a loudspeaker. But basically tour groups were using loudspeakers. And if you've been in Florence or even Rome, but Florence, for whatever reason, was like more popular, that people were using loudspeakers. It's more common in Rome and Naples, and even here where we are, that what it's done is the tour guide is mic'd, and everybody else has those little in-ear headbuds. What? Earbuds.
Earbuds. Headphones and earbuds.
Thank you. That's where I was going there. So it's more common than that, and you have the tour guide just speaking at a normal volume, so it's not that loud. But in Florence,
or really quietly, like in the Vatican, you can hear a lot of the tour guides are speaking at a hushed volume, and it's all kind of very like ASMR.
Yeah, because you're supposed to be quite quiet in the Vatican. So even our tour guide was talking like really quiet, and she was like, "So if you actually come over here."
Yeah,
and it was like, "Okay, I'm coming."
It was nice. That was like we were hearing like secrets. So, anyways, sorry, keep going.
Plus, actually, all those choirs kept playing. Like it was, I didn't realize like choirs come to St. Peter's Basilica to play, but as soon as it's over, it's like the next one starts up. So it's just like rotating a bunch of choirs. It was really quite interesting. No, so they're doing these things to kind of limit tour guides, which makes sense because they're like, okay, one of the problems are these giant tours. But what's happening is these tour guides are now like the same company will have the same 100-person tour that they were doing before.
That's
but now they
insane.
have 4 guides. And so 3 of the guides do nothing but just sort of corral the group. And they follow along with the leader's group. So it's still the same 100 people in an alleyway. It's just now they're all mic'd to the lead tour guide's
That's horrible.
thing. Right. Then to the individual 4, rather than each getting a different tour. And for one thing is basically the tour guides are like, it makes the tour guides look bad, but a lot of the tour guides, there's a little coalition, a little association that's basically been trying to, called Croce, I think, CROCE, and they have actually been the ones on the forefront of trying to enact limitations, because they're the ones saying that it's not good when there's a bunch of tour guides. It's really actually bad for us because it dilutes the pool. And again,
When there's a bunch of tour guides?
when there's a bunch of tour guides, yeah, because it makes it, it's no longer like, and I was going to get to it in a second, but I'll get to it now, is right now there's no standardization on who can be a tour guide in Venice. You have to get a license to be a tour guide. Anybody listening to this who wants to like do a little busking tour guide, to be clear, you do need a license. However, you don't need a license to give a free tour, which is one of the ones you just ask for tips at the end. And you don't necessarily, again, it's like, you get caught giving a tour, you don't get stopped and put in prison. You get fined, and then they let you continue with the tour. So as long as the tours make more money than you getting stopped and fined makes, then it's again one of those things. It's like you're just considering this as a fine to play. And the reason, in addition to one of these articles had a quote, and they're in some I think like the Piazza di San Marco or something like that, some sort of popular area of Rome. And one of these tour guides overheard another one saying like, "Oh, this is a heavy mafia area," and this person wrote, it's like seething because they're like, "It's not. It's Venice. There's no mafia in Venice." But it's just like, it's kind of like
So
in Savannah
basically,
with
you
the
can
ghost
just
tour things.
yeah, you can just say whatever you want, and there's no regulation.
There's nothing. And that's the thing that these a lot of tour guide associations are trying to stop. They're like, no. We're not trying to be like the end all be all. We're not trying to be this like this gate to, we're not trying to gatekeep being a tour guide. But if we can organize, for instance, only X amount of tour guides out at one time with X amount of people throughout the day. And then also everyone now gets because now all of a sudden you have like tour guides who are getting almost nothing and you have tour guides who are making a lot. But like we can also even that out a little bit. So we can get like, if you're a tour guide in Rome or in Venice, you have a guaranteed 5 tours a day or 3 tours a day or whatever it is. Or
it's like a union.
Exactly.
Which makes a lot of sense here. There's it's not the same. I mean, there's a whole different history behind like the unions and organizations here in Italy, which we won't get into, but it is very typical here for like every industry having like an organization, like
or
architects
union, yeah.
or union, yeah. But I guess, I mean, an organization is another way of putting it. Like there's a group of architects in certain areas. There's groups of, construction workers. There's groups of, I don't know, every industry, like
doctors, lawyers, service workers, construction workers, I think you already mentioned.
So it's very typical here to have like your local union, your local organization. So that totally makes sense that they would have an organized group of tour guides.
If I may actually throw in, the reason it's typical here is also, if I'm not mistaken, there is no federal mandated minimum wage in Italy. The unions set the minimum wage.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a couple other European countries are the same way. The unions essentially are set what that minimum wage for that job is in that country, not necessarily the government. So it's kind of like, which is a little more interesting. It's kind of democratizing the power of labor, if that makes sense. This is a good word. This podcast is going off in a different direction. I apologize. But it's one of those things where I think that like if the construction worker is saying, for blowing out my back and blowing out my knees and developing, debilitating physical problems before I'm 45, I need X amount of money because I can't work at 48.
That makes sense.
So there's a lot of that sort of thing of like how much money you're going to need, because now you're going to need, a medical care, you're going to need to pay, you're going to need disability and this and that. I only say that because we have a neighbor who is just, I think he basically keeps getting, it's not even knee replacement, but it's like his knee is just shot and he has to keep getting something done. And I think but it's working towards a replacement basically. He's also gone completely deaf because apparently ear equipment did not exist 30 years ago. So he does like from jackhammering, I think. So he just has gone completely deaf. Anyway, all that was to say though, is you're right. Because so I think there's having a union association, an organization that would sort of mandate whether it's there's no commission, where there's just simply, we get paid, the company would get paid X amount and then they would pay out their, tour guides X amount. Because again, tipping isn't really a thing in Italy. So there's ways of solving it. And a lot of the tour guides, while being viewed as the problem, are trying to also solve the problem, because like, it's, you can't do away with tour guides in Venice, because all you're going to have is a bunch of these sort of people giving tours anyway, but there's no, it's going to be one of those things where, I mean, everybody's going to be on TripAdvisor and Reddit and even Instagram trying to find out, like, where's a tour guide I can trust? Like, where's somebody I can trust? Because otherwise you're going to go home and, start talking about the mafia in Venice and everyone's going to look at you like, what are you talking about? So all that being said, is those are the two, that and the loudspeakers are two things that they've, again, try to clamp down on. But to not end this podcast on a sad note, I thought it'd be kind of fun. Like, what can you do? Because I think that we do have we try to do a sustainable sort of slant on a lot of our stuff, like a sustainable twist. And because this is the hotels and lodging month, is one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up. Because also it's quite recent news. And one of the things we're going to talk about on Wednesday. Well, we're going to talk about Tuesday probably, but you're going to hear it Wednesday or not, depending if you listen to this in the future. Is basically the types of lodging in Italy, and we're trying not to phrase it as like traditional lodging versus Airbnb, but that's probably what it's going to end up being as. And that's a big issue right now in Venice. There is just one thing that you mentioned, that like what the people are asking for. It's essentially limit the amount of Airbnbs, because right now it is just simply so profitable to take your, go ahead.
And I just want to clarify, it's, to my knowledge, it's not necessarily limit the Airbnbs, but it's make sure that people are doing it responsibly, because just like in Savannah and a lot of cities all over the world, corporations are buying up houses and then putting Airbnbs in them, rather than it being like the old style pensione, where it's like
Right.
someone lives in the house and they also rent out a room. It seems like a lot of people are for, if my grandma has a house with 2 extra bedrooms and she wants to rent out those 2 bedrooms, okay, cool. She's probably going to do it responsibly. But we don't want a mega corporation to buy up the entire block and then rent it out as Airbnbs.
Yes, and they just want to limit Airbnbs in general.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's right now it's uncapped, so it could be the entire city becomes Airbnbs. So they do want to, because you're right. But even so, like using your example of the Italian grandmother who has 2 extra bedrooms, they still want it to be like if she's in a non-touristy area, then those can only be lodging for people who live in Venice.
Oh, okay.
Basically, because they're trying to essentially limit the amount of, because I mean, truthfully, thinking of even touristy areas in Savannah, you don't really want to live in those areas.
No.
I'm even thinking like Florence or parts of Rome or Siena. I mean, they get loud, they get boisterous. People are on vacation. They're not like modulating their voice. So it's 2 or 3 in the morning. People are yelling up, screaming up and down the street. They're playing music. There's, it's just like, it's just noise constantly. So these are not like amazing areas to live in if you actually live in if you have to wake up early, if you have to work, if you have to do anything that revolves around living. But they do want to limit Airbnbs simply because, as you mentioned, a lot of these are large companies who have found it profitable to buy up houses or apartment buildings, rent them out for 6 to 10 times more than it's worth on a monthly rate, and then in 10, 15 years, even 5 years, sell them for a tidy profit because these are, they're typically buying up things that are in wealthier, they've turned it into a wealthy neighborhood because you buy up the entire neighborhood, you can jack up the property costs. We say that again because this is what happens in Savannah. This is pretty, like this was happening, I think, just before COVID, and then like through COVID, it was just large companies buying up houses and in theory trying to get entire neighborhoods in order to rent like out the neighborhood, and was kind of like everyone was like, well, this is not good. Because again, even if people who sell their house, who were like, oh, this is a great payday, I sell my house, all of a sudden realized they sold their house without doing any research first, in the sense that they didn't realize they couldn't live in Savannah anymore. Because like,
Right.
oh,
Regular people are getting priced out.
yeah, that was like my only place to live. I was thinking I could still rent something for $800 a month. I didn't realize rent is $2,200 a month. And that's what's happening in Venice. It's if you can find a place to rent from like on a monthly basis, as you would in any other city, I mean, it's astronomical. Unless you're renting from somebody who is anti-tourist, I guess. But and he's going to mention like it's not wrong, I think, intrinsically to have an extra floor that you want to rent out or an extra bedroom that you want to rent out, and you're like, especially like making ends meet. It's not a bad idea at all. It makes perfect sense. And I think you're right. You're right. There is a responsible way to do it. I think it's also difficult when if everyone does it, then it's as a group, it kind of becomes irresponsible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's difficult. Like, even if everyone does it in a good way, it's still like the end result is still the same. And of course, there's all these things about like, as we mentioned just earlier, that people renting out their houses in Venice that they, according to their residency, they still quote unquote live in. So they're paying incredibly reduced taxes because it's their primary residence. They're renting somewhere, something like right now where we live is somebody else's primary residence. So they pay almost nothing in taxes on this apartment, on this house, whatever this is, on this floor. But if they were to not declare it as a primary residence, they would pay a couple hundred times the amount in rent. Instead of paying a couple €100 a month, it's almost a couple €100 a year. It's a couple €1,000 a year, because Italy does try to limit the amount of houses that one person can own in order to have housing for everybody.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was going to explain, is that your primary residence has a lower tax rate than your, second and third vacation homes.
Yes. And also I think even lower, the trash rate is done by the amount of people in that house basically, and it kind of scales up, so that like a primary residence can have 7 people in it, and that might be paying less for trash than one secondary residence with one person living in it. Just again, it's a way to sort of like, if you're wealthy enough to have a second residence, awesome. But also, we don't want it to be such a common thing that no one has anywhere to live. So all that is kind of to say is what can you do? And part of it is hotels. There are still hotels in Venice that are smaller cheaper in the sense of like not like you don't have to stay at the 5-star so and so hotel. There are still like pensione type hotels that are still exist. There are still hotels outside of Mestre and paying the tourist tax. Basically, because it seems like at least Venice, the conclusion is that using Airbnb is contributing to the issue. Even if it's done in a sustainable way right now, it seems like it's contributing to the issue. However, that being said, as you mentioned, there are ways like in a non-touristy area of Venice, in an Airbnb, rather than like the center of everything, it could be, again, a way of sustainably doing it because you're helping out somebody who might not be able to make money otherwise. But I still think that like something you and I constantly push is using hotels or using there's not quite pensiones anymore, but there are type like room stays type things where you were renting out a room in like a hotel, but like it's somebody's house, which I guess is kind of like Airbnb, but it's taxed differently. I think it's all this comes down to is Airbnbs are not taxed the same as a hotel because that would be ridiculous. Like a hotel is, expecting to make X amount of money a year. Airbnb could, in theory, make nothing a year. So they're not taxed nearly as high. I think what you and I often push for is even for ourselves, like even though we've stayed in Airbnbs, we really try not to, and it's typically our last resort. But it's also, I know that they're getting in trouble now in the States. You mentioned you were going to bring up next episode. But
yeah, they're getting. I need to do more research on it just so I can frame it the right way. But this is not an Italy issue at this point, but Airbnb has gotten in a lot of trouble recently in the U.S. because there are many people who rent out Airbnbs, and people have found hidden cameras in an astonishing amount of these places. And therefore, if someone finds a hidden camera, they will often report it to Airbnb. But Airbnb, instead of going to the local authorities and reporting it, have just been covering it up.
Makes sense, yeah, because it hurts share value.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently it has been a massive issue. And people who work for Airbnb are like, yeah, this has been a big problem for us. We're trying to figure it out, but we're told to squash it, essentially. So that is horrible because it's abuse of people who are, staying, like being filmed in a place where you think is safe is abuse.
It's all, but I mean, like for the, do you know who Airbnb sides with when a house is trashed? That's something we can look up next one. I thought it was one of the issues, one of the complaints was it wasn't, or at least at the beginning, it wasn't ever the homeowners. It was always the...
they side with the people who are staying.
Yes, basically.
And so then the onus, is that the word? Is on the homeowner.
Nice. Look at that.
Thank you.
Look at you using some SAT words. Right. And I think that was what led to, because I knew even on Reddit for years, it was get hidden cameras and put them in the corners, like the living room and the dining room, places that like are often most trashed. Like don't be weird and put them in the bedroom and the bathroom. Because that was for years, like not to defend it, to be clear, but just like it was if Airbnb is not going to side with me, I have to protect myself. Otherwise I can't use it to make money kind of thing.
Which is understandable. And I mean, it's still weird, but understandable. And I think that there was some sort of regulation, like not regulation, that's the wrong word. Airbnb put in a rule for itself and for the people who run Airbnbs. I don't know what you call that, like the homeowner, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
That if they had cameras, they had to tell tenants or renters that they had to tell people staying there that there were cameras. And so I'm sure some people did that. But the problem lately is that the cameras are in bathrooms and in bedrooms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they are very much...
There are creepy people out there.
Yes, and they are very much filming people in intimate moments for that purpose. And so the people who should be getting in trouble are abusers. It's not people who are trying to protect themselves.
And I think that's I mean, I don't know, maybe it happened in Italy, but Italy seems like so far behind on things, just like you have to still bring your own linens and things like that. So I feel like hopefully I haven't gotten to the cameras yet. I don't know. I mean, that being said, this is what we will cover in the next episode when we do talk about Airbnbs versus hotels and other types of living.
We'll get into it.
We will get into it. And again, this is one of those things where we kind of want to be clear, because we've been clear before. This is not to shame you, our dear listeners, for using Airbnb. We also understand, like, if you're a family, especially a family of like more than 4, a hotel room is borderline impossible. Like a family of four can, in theory, 2 queen size beds. Okay, it's tight, but
They
it can
can also
happen.
be super convenient because you can save money by cooking for yourself
Exactly.
when you have you're staying in an apartment where there is a kitchenette or something.
Yes.
So that makes total sense that you'd want to stay somewhere like that.
Yeah.
It's not. We certainly don't want to shame anybody coming to visit and stay and be responsible, lovely travelers of the world. It's always the organizations and corporations
100%.
behind these things that are at fault.
Yeah, no, that's so. Yeah, our ire, if you will, is never directed at you. Is always directed at sort of the company behind it. But no, as you mentioned, it's like, especially if you are, it's a budget travel situation. If you're just like, we're trying to make this trip happen, and if we need to cook a couple nights, we need to get, that makes total sense. And we still encourage that. We still encourage you to come and visit.
One thing you can do is don't take a giant cruise ship into Venice.
Yeah, that might be the thing.
That is very much an action that you can take for yourself. And it's not, I know Viking cruises are quite expensive, but that is an example of a small ship. These are not those.
Because all this are river cruises, yeah.
Yeah, the ones that are causing problems, the ones that are causing ecological damage are giant ships.
Yeah.
So that is
3 to 4 times bigger than the Titanic, to be clear.
what an interesting metric.
Yeah, there's a great picture because I think not Carnival, maybe Carnival.
Carnival cruises?
No, who's the icon? Voyager of the Seas, Icon of the Seas. Is that all?
I have no idea.
Royal Caribbean? Maybe
Oh,
Royal
maybe.
Caribbean. They just released Icon of the Seas. It's their largest one yet. It has like it's, it has a park in the front of it. It's got the infinity pool. It's got this other it's insanely huge. And it's it runs on liquid natural gas instead of bunker fuel, or the heck it's been run on before. Because it's supposed to be less carbon, but it's more methane emissions, which actually is worse.
Worse? Okay.
It's like less of a half-life, but it's also much worse for, I think it's like 7 years in the atmosphere kind of thing, but it's horrible for the 7 years kind of thing. But no, there's this, Icon of the Seas, I think is what it's called. And it's just, again, we're talking about, I have no idea. I mean, thousands of people on a ship that just sort of, I don't know. It's just an interesting, because I feel like, there was a time where, and I think hopefully one day, because I know we talk about airplanes and being bad for the environment and things like that. I'm like, the idea of being on a ship to cross the Atlantic or the Pacific sounds amazing. It's just, not.
Yeah.
Maybe.
They're not doing it responsibly.
Right. Yeah. So.
And therefore, you can make the choice to not be on a giant cruise that goes into Venice, but go stay.
Because there are
in
other
Venice.
ways to, if you want to be on the water, there are definitely other ways. There are ferries, there are other smaller ships. If you especially sailing, there are definitely in Italy, you can charter sailing ships around Italy. I mean, if you like the idea of being on the water, there is a lot of other things to do. There's not much, I don't think there's no substitute for the floating hotel thing, though. That's what a cruise ship is. But yeah, that unfortunately, that is the one that's probably the most, at this point, not friendly for both the cities or the seas or really anything. But that being said, I think that's everything. That was just it was supposed to be a quick update. It's now a 45-minute update. But I was just going to kind of round it off. Anyone who's got to this point, how does it affect you next year? Simply, it might be more days. It's looking like it's going to be twice as expensive. And that is just at this point. Things might change, continue to change as we get into, we're only in August. Gee, I thought we were in October. We're only in August. This has been a year. So we're only in August of this year. So, a lot can change by May of next year, May of 2025.
And we will keep you updated.
We will, yeah. And if you'd like to follow that kind of stuff, the next update might be in the newsletter. And that will just be these little blasts once a month, maybe once every 2 months with information like this. So if you'd like to follow our newsletter, you can find it at onlyabag.com. Otherwise, you can follow our Instagram where we'll post things like that. That is only_a_bag, which is, I guess, an Instagram account. So I was going to say not at anything. And then if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, I don't know, details, anything interesting, anything not interesting, anything at all, you can email us at onlyabagofficial@gmail.com. And I think that's everything.
I think that's it.
And if you'd like to support the channel, the podcast channel, the Only a Bag, if you'd like to support the two of us, really, there's no one else behind the scenes. You can do so using the link below for booking. So if you do happen to book anything, and you want to help us out, you can use the link below. It'll give us a percent or 2%. I have no idea. Some percentage of bookings fees. I think is what we get. I don't think we get a percentage of the whole thing. So It's a couple cents, but it would help us out
It does
tremendously.
help us out.
So yeah, I think that's everything.
That's it. And next time we're gonna get into it on Airbnb.
We're gonna get into it on Airbnb. Yeah, I know. Again, this is to be very clear. It's on Airbnb, not on people who use Airbnb,
Absolutely.
and not even on people who rent out their house or their apartment as an Airbnb.
Right. Just the corporation.
Unless you have if you have 40 or 50 houses you rent out as Airbnbs, we might be talking about you. To be clear, just heads up. But until then, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.